Good morning, State Senator Matt Pouliot, Senate District 15, Augusta, China, Oakland, Sydney, and Bassboro.
Great, and I don't see Representative Terry or Bickford, so Representative Carmichael, Joe, can you introduce yourself?
Good morning. I'm Representative Mickey Carmichael from District 137, which is parts of Hancock, Washington, and Penobscot counties.
And Representative Gramlich.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator. I am Lori Gramlich, and I represent House District 13, which is the lovely seaside community of Old Orchard Beach.
Excellent. Representative Hanley, I see you're with us.
Yes, good morning. I'm Jeff Hanley. I represent District 87, which is Pittston, Alna, Westcasset, and Randolph.
Thank you. And Representative Matlock.
Good morning. I'm Ann Matlack. I represent House District 92, which includes the communities of Cushing, Thomaston, South Thomaston, St. George, Matinicus, Cree Haven, and the Muscle Ridge Islands.
Great. And I don't see Representative Perry with us. Representative Sachs.
Good morning. My name is Melanie Sachs. I'm the representative from House District 48, which is Freeport and part of Pownell. Thank you.
Excellent. Representative Terry's joined us.
I did. Sorry about that. Lost the link. I'm Representative Mo Terry. I represent District 26, the west side of Gorham, and I serve as House Chair.
Excellent. I'm Senator Ben Chipman, serve as Senate Chair of the committee. I represent Senate District 27, which is part of the city of Portland. I'd also like to introduce Avery Page, who's our committee clerk, and Julie Jones, who's our committee analyst. So we've got public hearings today on 3 bills. I guess we could just take them in the order that they're listed. Does that make sense, Representative Terry?
Absolutely.
So you're up, I guess, first on LD 141. Well, before we start, I just want to announce, I guess, to the public that these are public hearings we're having today on 3 bills. Everything's being broadcast online through our YouTube channel and through Zoom, and everything you say is recorded. And everyone who is speaking today is signed up in advance with our clerk. We have a list of folks that are speaking either in favor of the bill, in opposition to the bill, and either for or against the bill. We'll begin by having the sponsor introduce each bill, followed by any legislative co-sponsors, and then we'll take testimony from those in favor, followed by those in opposition, followed by those neither for nor against. So with that said, I guess we'll start the public hearing for LD 141. This is an act to make technical changes to the tax laws, sponsored by Representative Terry.
Thank you very much, Senator. This is a department bill, so my only thing to say to you is I have no questions to ask and no questions to answer, and I'm going to let Mr. D'Alessandro take it from here. Thank you.
Excellent. Is Mr. D'Alessandro with us?
Just promoted him.
Okay. Great. So we, I guess technically we have to ask if there's any questions for the sponsor. Are there any questions for Representative Terry? Don't see any. Great. So next we'll take testimony from those in favor, starting with Mr. D'Alessandro.
Okay, thank you. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, members of the Taxation Committee, good morning. I'm Daniel D'Alessandro. I'm a staff attorney for the Office of Tax Policy and Maine Revenue Services. I'm here today at the request of the administration to testify in support of LD 141, an act to make technical changes to the tax laws. LD 141 is legislation submitted by the Department of Administration and Financial Services. As you know, Maine Revenue Services prepares 1 or more bills each year that propose changes to various existing provisions of Maine law. These changes are primarily made to Title 36. The purpose of LD 141 is to make various technical improvements and clarifications consistent with existing tax administration and other tax-related executive branch functions. The department has also submitted another bill, which has not yet been printed, an act to amend the state's tax laws. The difference between 2 bills is the nature of the recommendations. Whereas the act to amend contains substantive changes, this bill contains the technical, non-substantive changes to Maine's tax laws. These changes have no impact on the tax receipts included in the recent baseline revenue forecast by the Revenue Forecasting Committee. The present bill before you, LD 141, makes technical changes to clarify statutory language consistent with ongoing administrative practice, enact necessary administrative provisions, improve syntax, and repeal unnecessary and outdated language. I would like to note that there are a few technical clarifications to recently enacted legislation where the changes are retroactive to the original effective date of the legislation being clarified. In addition, the administration would like to propose an amendment to the bill to make taxpayer identification numbers included on the commercial forestry excise tax return confidential and not public records for purpose of the Freedom of Access Act. You should have a copy of that amendment. You should have in your folders a chart prepared by Maine Revenue Services that breaks down each provision of the bill, including the proposed amendment, and matches it with the corresponding paragraph from the bill's summary. This side-by-side chart provides a brief explanation of each provision of the bill. The administration looks forward to working with the committee on the bill. Representatives from Maine Revenue Services will be here for the work session to provide additional information and respond in detail to the committee's questions. And I can go briefly through the side chart now, take your questions on selected provisions, or wait to address any questions you have at the work session. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you have.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. D'Alessandro. We have a question from Representative Sachs.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, and that's one of my questions. I had 3 clarifying questions regarding different sections and wondered if you prefer them now or to wait for the work session. Mr. Chair, what would you prefer?
Yeah, go ahead and ask. I mean, I think we can ask a question now if you'd like to.
Okay, if that's all right. And Mr. D'Alessandro, if they're more appropriate to respond in the work session, please just let me know. The first question was the provision section B1 around amends diabetic supplies exemption to require use by the purchaser. Could you speak a little bit to that? I'm wondering if this now excludes caregivers from being able to, who might have part of that exemption. So I just wanted some more clarification around that.
So the purpose of this change is to require that the supplies actually be used for diabetic purposes. And that's consistent with current administrative practice. And this is important for multi-purpose items, perhaps compression socks or something like that, that could have different uses. And so this is going to require that the supply actually be used by the purchaser for the purposes. Right,
right. So I'm just concerned that, for example, if a caregiver is buying compression socks for their elderly parent, for example, who has diabetes, that somehow they would no longer, because it's not being used by the purchaser, however, they're the caregiver and responsible for that. Does this impact them at all?
So we can bring some more information on that to the work session, but this change is not designed to exclude them. That would still be using the material for the diagnosis and treatment of human diabetes.
That's much appreciated. Thank you very much for bringing that. My second question was on B4, just to clarify what is the problem we're trying to solve here when it says clarifies the exemption for nonprofit worldwide charitable organizations. What's the clarification there?
So what happened when this provision was enacted, Maine Revenue Services had some technical clarifications to the language, but at the point in the process, those couldn't be incorporated. We believe that they were in line with what the committee was envisioning, but the work session had already been completed and the bill was moving forward. And so these are the same changes that we presented at that point. And they reflect our current administrative practice, and they resolve ambiguities in the language to align with our current administrative practice. And they're not intended and wouldn't move any organizations that are currently receiving the exemption out of it.
Okay, I just wonder if you mind, again, forwarding, since I wasn't on the committee then, that would be super helpful to have that language. Thank you. And then my last one reflects the testimony that was submitted by Maine Municipal around C2 and the Betty exemption reimbursement, and just wondered if you had seen that testimony and can talk a little bit about that provision.
I can. So this provision clarifies that enhanced business equipment tax exemption reimbursement, Betty and B reimbursement, only applies to tax increment financing exempt business equipment when the reimbursement is used to fund a TIF development program. And I think one part of the confusion here is that there are actually two section 5224s in Maine law. There's one that's been repealed in the Municipal Capital Improvement Districts chapter. That's no longer current law, that's been repealed. There's one in the current Development Districts chapter, and that's what's being referenced here. So I think that's part of the confusion that's in their testimony.
All right, so I'll take a look at that, and if I have any further questions, I'll take them up at the work session. Thank you so much.
Any additional questions from members of the committee for Mr. D'Alessandro?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Representative Carmichael.
Good morning, Mr. D'Alessandro. I did have a question on that, the same as Representative Satch, that we might have unintended circumstances with the diabetic supplies portion. But we can address that more in the work session, like you stated. Under the property tax, it says it clarifies that the local assessor qualifying examination and individual examinations results are confidential and thus not producible under the Freedom of Access Act request. Are we trying to address a problem that we've had there? Or?
All right, so this is the proposed amendment. We currently do not have taxpayer identification numbers. Those would include social security numbers on the commercial forestry excise tax return. And the commercial forestry excise tax is not currently confidential, but those identification numbers are being added to the return. And having that information be non-confidential would be a problem. That's something that taxpayers would expect to remain confidential in Maine Revenue Services. So before we can make that change to the forms, we need this provision in law that will protect the social security numbers and other taxpayer identification numbers.
Thank you very much.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. D'Alessandro, for your testimony. We'll now take testimony from Lisa Harvey McPherson in support, and then followed by Kate Dufour, who's going to speak neither for nor against.
There. Good morning. Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Lisa Harvey McPherson, and I'm here today on behalf of Northern Light Health to speak in support of one specific section of this bill that impacts our organization. You'll see that Section B5 of this bill refers to municipally funded hospitals and strikes Mayo Regional Hospital and Dover Foxcroft from this section. Northern Light Mayo Regional Hospital merged into Northern Light on March 1st, 2020, and this transfer of ownership discontinued Mayo's status as a municipally funded hospital. So Section B5 of this bill is the technical correction that reflects the current status of Mayo Regional Hospital, a subsidiary of Northern Light Health, no longer a municipally funded hospital, and we're in support of that correction.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Harvey McPherson. Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
So that concludes testimony from those in favor. We don't have anybody signed up to speak in opposition, so we'll now move to testimony from those neither for nor against. We've got one person signed up to speak, Kate Dufour from Maine Municipal Association.
Good morning, everyone. Senator Representative Terry and members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Kate Dufour, and I'm here on behalf of the Maine Municipal Association to provide testimony neither for nor against LD 141, particularly Part C2 of the proposal. I appreciate that Mr. D'Alessandro pointed out that there's a we're not talking about a repealed section of law, but I'm still a little confused with respect to the intent of the change and what it does. And maybe it's just me, but when Better, which was the Betty, the Business Equipment Tax Reimbursement Program, which meant not reimbursement, but yeah, reimbursement program, sorry. When Better was on the books, what happened is an eligible business would apply to the state for reimbursement for the taxes paid on their personal property tax. This program evolved into an exemption. So what happened is rather than the business taking a gamble with the legislature as to whether or not they would be reimbursed for that expense, it became an exemption. And so communities were reimbursed for 50% of their losses, with the exception of a community that a higher than average amount of personal property in their community that became exempt because of the exemption. The enhanced reimbursement was provided because some of that revenue, that business equipment tax revenue, was used to fund municipal programs like economic development programs, loan programs, business programs. And so if we had had 100% exemption, receiving only 50%, in some communities, that wouldn't have been enough to fund the business programs that were in place when the exemption took place. So the question to the committee, or the question to the department, is whether or not that's going to impact any community, and if those agreements are still out there, because if they are, it'll have the impact of shifting additional burden onto those high personal property communities. So we're just asking the committee to dig in with respect to this question and see whether or not there are any underlying problems for municipalities. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ford. Good to see you. Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. So I guess that concludes the public hearing for LD 141. We'll now open up the public hearing on LD 412. This is an act to authorize the use of tax increment finance funds for construction or renovation of municipal offices and other buildings. That's sponsored by Representative Carlo. Is Representative Carlo here?
Just promoted him.
Okay. So we'll take testimony from Representative Carlo, and then followed by Representative Bailey and Senator Bailey, who are also signed up to speak as co-sponsors of the bill. Representative Carlo, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. I'm Representative Nathan Carlo, and I'm here to present my bill LD 412. I'd like to say first how pleased I am to be working alongside Senator Donna Bailey of Saco, Representative Kyle Bailey of Gorham, in a bipartisan way to address this really important issue. As the committee may be aware, the law as it's currently written specifically prevents the use of TIF funding for the purposes that I've outlined in my bill. I believe that provision to be extremely unwise, as there is a compelling association between the quality of municipal buildings and the services that they provide to the community at large. In Hollis, a town that I represent, the municipal building is deteriorating at a rapid pace. And unfortunately, there is simply not enough money to correct its many problems. This fact has absolutely hindered economic development. Aside from this fact, there are several economic factors that the committee should consider. The first of which is that town structures that are well maintained will increase property values, and buildings that are aging and unsafe will reflect poorly on the town's commitment to improving public infrastructure. These dynamics deter and dissuade companies and investors alike from doing business with the town. The second factor that I'd point out is that when TIF districts are successful, the administrative burden increases, making it entirely befitting that towns would be authorized to use TIF funding in a limited way for this purpose. I understand that there will be questions raised during this forum regarding the extent to which the factors that I've just outlined affect the local economy. The committee should consider this fact. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for every municipality in Maine. And what one community might not consider to be economic development may very well play a crucial role in another part of the state. blanketed approach is hurting small towns like Hollis. And because of this, the committee should consider voting in favor of granting communities additional flexibility to determine what constitutes economic development. In Maine's wealthier municipalities, the money to build state-of-the-art facilities may be easily available without the use of TIF dollars. But in small towns like Hollis, this could not be farther from the case. But it is also true that they're equally as deserving of a facility that is safe, that is equitable, and that provides for the growing needs of our town because of its growing economy and because of the tremendous success of our TIF district. So with that, I would like to conclude my statement. And I again thank committee members for their consideration of this testimony, and I would be delighted to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative Carlo. Questions from members of the committee? Representative Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Carlo. Tell me a little bit about the projects that Hollis has used their TIF money for economic development. And I guess my question is, do you see that there would be an issue in further economic development if we extended the TIFs to municipalities?
Thank you very much for that question, Representative. What I can tell you is that we have one TIF district in Hollis, and that is a Poland Springs distribution facility.
Right.
With respect to ongoing economic development projects in the town, I can't speak to that. We will have a member of the Board of Selectmen there present later on. I can definitely circle back with you at the work session or at another time to get you the information that you have asked for.
Okay, terrific. I'll actually ask the person from the Board of Selectmen and see if that would be very helpful, but thank you.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for presenting that bill, Representative Carlo. We will now take testimony from Senator Bailey, followed by Representative Bailey.
No relation that we know of. Good morning, everyone. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and other honorable members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Senator Donna Bailey, and I proudly represent the residents of Hollis, Leamington, Old Orchard Beach, Saco, and part of Buxton. I'm here today to present LD 412, an act to authorize the use of tax increment financing funds for constructing or renovating municipal offices and other buildings, of which I am the lead co-sponsor. The chair of the select board in Hollis, who I believe you'll be hearing from shortly, brought the idea for this bill to my attention. He told me that Hollis's town hall, the center for all municipal business, was in desperate need of repairs or replacement. Instead of raising taxes on Hollis residents to finance the renovation, we had the idea to use tax increment financing for this project and others going forward. Tax increment financing, or TIF, as I'm sure many of you know, is a way for municipal governments to boost economic development of a specific area by using the projected future tax revenue of the new development as the initial investment. The idea is that the property taxes will rise after the construction or renovation of the project, ultimately boosting the town's revenue. What does having a presentable municipal building have to do with economic development, you might ask? As someone said to me, attracting new residents and businesses to a community is like speed dating, and first impressions are everything. One of, if not the first places a prospective new resident or business notices or interacts with in a community is its municipal buildings. That first impression is everything and may be the difference between a project going forward or not. Not every town has the benefit of a historic city hall in its downtown. This is a way to help level the playing field. Ultimately, LD 412 would allow TIF to be used for the construction or renovation of municipal offices or other buildings, while placing a cap on the amount of revenue that can be used for this purpose over a 20-year period. amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, putting any unnecessary fiscal burden on towns and cities in Maine by using up reserve money or putting undue burden on citizens by raising taxes is unconscionable. This is why TIF can be such a valuable tool for Maine right now and going forward. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Great. Thank you, Senator Bailey. Questions from members of the committee? See none. Thank you for your testimony. We'll now hear from Representative Bailey, followed by, Dave McCoubrey of Hollis. Representative Bailey, welcome.
Thank you. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and members of the Taxation Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of LD 412, an act to authorize the use of tax increment financing funds for constructing or renovating municipal offices and other buildings. After speaking with Representative Carlo and my town manager in Gorham and surveying the other states to see how they handle this issue, I decided to support this bill for two primary reasons. The first is I believe the legislature should give greater flexibility to cities and towns in how to raise and spend revenue. And second, I believe that the design, capacity, functionality, and use of a municipal center and the image and reputation it casts and furthers of a community can either foster or hinder economic development within that city or town. According to the Council of Development Finance Agencies, in some states, TIF districts can be created only for municipalities. In other states, they can benefit school districts. Depending on the state, TIF funds can be used not only for roads, parking garages, transit stops, and the like, but also to build schools, convention centers, golf courses, tourism projects, sporting facilities, museums, wastewater treatment facilities, to pay the salaries of city employees who are engaged in planning and economic development and included in the long list to build municipal centers. TIF funds can be used to construct municipal centers in Texas, one of America's largest economies. The same is true in the economically booming state of Colorado, and in rural states like Idaho, South Dakota, and West Virginia, and in New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Oregon in the West, as well as Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana in the Rust Belt, Virginia and South Carolina, and in the Northeastern United States, the states of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. The reality is that in my lifetime, the federal government has failed to be a real partner with states and local governments to adequately invest in our infrastructure. As a result, states and cities have been left to pick up the tab. In other words, our infrastructure is crumbling. And it's crumbling worse in some communities than in others, and worse in some areas and in some communities than in others. I believe that leaders and citizens in each town in Maine should determine how best to spend dollars generated from economic activity within their community, and that the legislature should give communities the flexibility to decide which investments will further local economic economic and community development goals and avoid tying their hands. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in front of you today.
Thank you, Representative Bailey. Questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. We'll now hear from Dave McCoubrey of Hollis, and then followed by Daniel Stevenson.
Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and members of the Taxation Committee, and thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Dave McCoubrey. I am Chair of the Hollis Select Board. I also want to thank the LD 412 sponsor, Representative Carlo, along with co-sponsors, Senator Bailey and Representative Bailey. I am pleased that this is a bipartisan effort. This proposed change to the TIF should create a positive benefit for many Maine communities now and in the future. The town of Hollis has a TIF that has been described as a neutral TIF, which does give the town some tax sheltering. However, I feel the TIF fund should have more flexibility by creating more allowed uses. Hollis has used most of the Hollis TIF funds on public safety and public works. I'd like to be able to use more on economic development and services to businesses. Currently, Hollis uses Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission for planning services when needed. Hollis Town Hall is out of room and overcrowded. It is a split-level ranch that was built in the 70s. There is no space to meet with businesses, layout drawings, and is only partly ADA accessible. To accommodate the COVID distance requirements, we added an office trailer and a service window. Having a population under 5,000, an expansion of the current building or building a new town hall would be a hardship for many in the town. Hollis has been described as a bedroom community, And we have a high average age and a large elderly population that is very concerned about tax increases forcing them from their homes. As this year, we just had 2 people pass the 100 mark. Hollis is currently working with an engineering group to evaluate our town hall property. We are working to identify areas on that property for possible business ventures and hoping to build a needed new town hall soon. In my younger years, I grew up in Portland and made many trips to City Hall to work with the multiple departments located there. I was amazed by the space that they had. Several years ago, I spoke with the Portland Economic Development and Code Enforcement personnel about a project I was working on. I was amazed by the enthusiasm and willingness to help potential business ventures. I do not foresee Hollis getting as big as Portland. However, we need to be able to handle and encourage growth for the future. I have heard that some supporters of this bill would prefer to increase the amount of usable TIF fund for municipal buildings. The amount in the bill, we don't believe would build what we need to build just to get us by the next 30 or 40 years, but it would help a lot. I would support that change if you want to increase it, if it would help move this bill along. So in conclusion, I believe that allowing some TIF funds to be used for municipal buildings is a beneficial and reasonable use of these monies. And the best part of this bill that I see is it has no cost to the state. So I'd ask you to please vote to move this bill forward to help our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCoubrey. Is there any questions to members of the committee? Yes, Representative Sachs, followed by Representative Terry.
Actually, Representative Terry, if you don't mind going first, my question may be answered with yours.
Sure. So, Mr. McCoubrey, thank you very much for being here today. I totally understand. I drive through Hollis quite a bit, and I totally understand the needs for sure. I do wonder about the consequences, though, of at least for our state, and I understand that they're used in other states for different things. The consequences of economic development from building municipal properties out. Generally speaking, the municipal properties don't make money. I heard a little bit maybe about a tax increase after the fact. Did I get that right?
I'm not sure of your question.
Okay, so my concern is that there won't be money for economic development down the road. So I'm wondering if you can speak to what say the TIF money from Poland Spring brought you guys, and how you're able to kind of move that forward in your investments in economic development.
I did mention in my presentation about a neutral TIF. I was not there when they wrote it 20 years ago, actually a little over 20 years ago. I would have preferred to write it in the favor of the town, not being neutral, to put it bluntly there. Most of the monies, even we actually were backward at first. Part of the deal with Poland Spring, we had to buy new fire equipment, et cetera, et cetera. We've had to fix emergency routes. That's where I said most of the money's gone into public works and public safety, mainly the fire department. We have tried to work, and I didn't have this in my presentation. Our code enforcement officer had left a large city, kind of retired, and also worked as a planner. And we've been trying to work with some local people and some businesses, but again, part of our problem is we don't have space. And as part of this plan that we're working on where this came up, we actually are putting up some town-owned land that's been sitting for sale. And we have been watching the general fund. My goal is that between selling the land and if we can get use some money on the TIF and take some of the general fund, that we will have a minimal to no tax increase to our taxpayers. That's what we're shooting for in the end in our town. And we need and bottom line is we need a facility where we can work with these businesses and potential businesses to try to get them in our town, because we got one of the most popular and growing corridors on Route 202 that there is in Southern Maine.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
We got a question from Representative Sachs, followed by Senator Pouliot, and then by Representative Perry. Go ahead, Representative Sachs.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chairperson McCoubrey, as well, for being here. I just wanted to clarify, Representative Carlo had said that not having this facility has harmed economic development in your town. And I know it says there is some difficulty in working with businesses, but could you elaborate on that, please?
I don't know how much I can clarify that. I know that it's just the facility makes it hard to get them to come in and meet. And I hate to use this because I'm guilty of it. Perception sometimes is a major thing. If I was looking where to locate something, and I guess that's the best I can say. I can't tell you how much it's harmed, but we have not seen the influx. The best example, and it's not really a funny example, we don't have a dollar store. Actually, we don't have a shopping store. All the towns around us, dollar stores came in about, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years ago to every town around us except us. Now, I guess we'd have to ask them exactly why they made that decision, because they even went to the smaller town north of us, Leamington. And that's about the best say. All I know is we have not seen it. I can't totally explain it. I have gone and actually asked a big corporation that does a call center who is in Portland area. Well, they're actually moving from Scarborough to Portland. So I said, why wouldn't you want to come to Hollis? They said it was a perception that customers who wanted the area, it's going to be in the old port, for example. So I guess perception is a lot of the issue here on some people's minds. And they want to work with the towns that have the bigger, or cities that have the big economic planners and stuff like that. And that's kind of the feeling I got talking to them. And so we think we need to improve, and we need to improve in that direction to try to get some more in this area.
Yeah, thank you so much. And do you have an economic development person on your staff, an economic development director on your staff?
No, we do not at this time. The worst thing is I got no place to put them. I mean, our code enforcement office, which used to be one person, now has an administrative assistant and the secretary for our finance, planning, and appeals board all has to work in that office. And of course, during COVID, we've had to rotate people in and out. And we are meeting with some people out in that office trailer that we described earlier, just because we have the bottom line. If you put it, 9 people work upstairs of a split level, and that really doesn't give us much room.
Thanks so much.
Great. Senator Pouliot, followed by Representative Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question really is regarding your TIF district. And if you know what the captured assessed value of the district is. The reason I ask is that we had a bill last session that I sponsored because previously the TIF law only allowed for those resources to be used for fire stations, but we expanded it to be allowed for public safety facilities. The primary driver was that the city of Augusta is right now on the precipice of building a new police station, and those resources weren't able to be used. So we structured the bill to say it should not exceed 15% of the captured assessed value of the development district. So I'm just wondering, in Hollis's case, if you know what the value of the district is and what kind of number that would back into, because I'd be more inclined to support a percentage like we did with that bill than a certain dollar amount, because that would flex based on, community size and so forth.
Senator, unfortunately, I do not know that number. I wish I realized it. We can get it for you from my assessor. Actually, I was hoping to talk to her a little bit before this meeting, but she took the last 2 weeks off of vacation because we're trying to get people out that we let them carry over from last year. I could get that. The number you're talking about would probably be great for us because it's a fairly big district, as you know. And our next plan on the road is we actually need to do work on our fire stations too. They're starting to life out. And so again, that's where our problem is. We do have money in the TIF, quite a bit. We're expecting to put about $1 million a year in for the next 8 years. So there's quite a bit of money there that can be used. And I would just like to use it and try to keep the tax from increasing for our people in the town as much as we can. But would you like me to get that number and get it back to you?
Yeah, I think it would be helpful. Obviously, this bill was put forward initially to help your town, but we're impacting the whole state. And I feel like this is something I could get behind, but I'm just wondering if $1 million is the right number or if we ought to look at doing a percentage.
And that sounds like a great idea. I will get to my assessor, which I believe she'll be in today, and I will. How would you like me to fill it in?
Send it to our analyst and she'll provide it to us at the work session.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll do that and get that to you.
Sorry I just moved into a new office on Monday I got to get some blinds in here. It's probably like blinding you guys on the screen with all this light.
Well, I'm kind of laughing. Look, if I move forward, I'm having the same problem. So that's why I'm sitting back.
Representative Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councilor, for being here today. So I'm just curious about specifically about your project there in Hollis. You've outgrown your town hall and it's in need of repair aside from that. So it sounds like you're in the early stages of planning what the replacement might be. And I'm assuming the plan would be to bond the replacement and then pay the payments over time through the TIF. Is that kind of the structure you're looking at?
We had not looked at it that way. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm one of those people that doesn't, we do have a bond now for roads that we did. And unfortunately, we found out that we can't prepay it, which is being paid out of the TIF. I don't like paying interest. I like to use the money for something constructive. So again, like I mentioned earlier, my goal was if this can go through, we have some money in the general fund that we have not been taking out as it's gone back in the last few years. And we are selling property. As we speak, they might be working with a realtor this morning. And we're hoping, we're projecting, and this is completely off our heads till the engineers and architects come back, that this is going to be a $2 to $3 million project. So as you can run the numbers, if we had $1 million, we could take from TIF money, 750,000 to $1 million out of our general fund, and then sell property for 500,000. We have our $2.5 million right there. And our goal is to do it without bonding. If we have to do it, we will. Hopefully it's going to be a small bond.
That million is on hand in the TIF.
Yes, I'm sorry, you say what? How much is on hand?
You've got that million on hand already.
Yes, actually, we have. I would say they just paid some stuff. It's just under 3 million sitting in the TIF right now. Because once town hall's done, we're actually going to start engineering and designing that we need to either fix both our fire stations or end up with a brand new one. So we have a lot of stuff that we've let go for a long time that we have to get going on.
And you're eyeballing that TIF for the fire station as well?
Definitely, yes.
Additional questions from members of the committee? I just have one couple questions. Mr. McCuberry, what is the current mill rate for the town of Hollis, and when's the last time that was increased?
Well, the mill rate, I'm going to be careful. I believe we're at $14 right now. And I shouldn't probably do this, but the assessor believes because of the reval in the price of housing sales in Hollis, that, well, in fact, I should back up. We've just did GIS mapping. We're behind on a reval. We had to wait for mapping and stuff, but she believes the mill rate is actually going to drop because of the value of the town, which is going to jump tremendously because I don't know. Well, I don't know other places, including in Portland stuff, that we have been going up house values about $5,000 to $10,000 per year over the last 10 years. It's just amazing. So I believe it's 14 or 1450 at this moment, but she believes it's going to decrease because our value is going to go up.
Okay. So the mill rate's currently 14 or 14 and a half. And do you know when it was last increased?
It has increased every year.
Every year.
I mean, the good news is it's been fairly small increments. About 3 years ago when I wasn't in office, there was a big jump. There was a big spending going on. And other than that, I believe last year we either went up 25 or 50 cents. It's been pretty favorable, and we work hard not to put fluff in our budgets, and we got some very conservative and good people in town.
Great. I guess that there's no further questions from anyone. We appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you.
We will now go to Kate Dufour to testify in favor, and then that will round out those that are in favor, and then we'll go to those against, which will be Daniel Stevenson. So, Ms. Dufour, welcome back.
Thank you. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Kate Dufour. I'm here on behalf of the Municipal Association to provide provisional support for LD 412. Our members see the bill as an appropriate expansion of a vital economic development tool, which will allow municipalities to use TIF to fund renovations and new municipal buildings. Municipal officials support this economic development tool for two ways, and we believe it's economic development. The first is its business development. The buildings that house planning, financing, assessing, code enforcement, and licensing departments all serve to promote economic development and provide assistance to the business communities. So that investment is economic development. The second is with respect to attracting new development, which you've seen. Municipal officials believe that investments in libraries and community centers are just as worthy as investments in public safety buildings. And we believe this does attract new people to locate within our community's boundaries and bring their businesses and everything else that they have with them. It's important to note that in the past, the TIF program has divided the municipal community because one of the crux of the TIF program is that it allows the community to shelter its value. And when you shelter your value, you benefit from increases in revenue sharing, for example, and decreases in school and county assessments, which are shifted to others. In the past, 25 years ago, it wouldn't have been unfounded for MMA to oppose this because it pit our communities against each other. But that has completely changed. A couple of years ago, we conducted a TIF survey and we divided the participants in the survey in two pots, those that use TIFs and those that do not use TIFs. And we were expecting the non-TIF communities to say this is an unfair program that needs to be modernized. But what we heard, in fact, was the non-TIF towns were saying, we can't use this tool, let the larger communities use it. And this was in 2016. That's changed. Our position on, or our members' impressions or perceptions on the TIF law has changed again, and we're moving closer to being all on one page, because for large communities, this is the most valuable economic tool they have. There are very limited economic tools out there, and for large communities, this is the best one. With respect to small communities, it's the only economic development tool that's available to them. And if it wasn't for TIFs, small rural communities wouldn't be able to make the investments that the TIF law has allowed. And what it really does is it puts communities on a level playing field. The access that Portland has and the tools with respect to economic development can now be afforded to Madison as well. And so there's great support for the TIF program and expanding it. The reason I'm providing provisional testimony is that our members do not believe there should be that $1 million figure attached to it. Communities should be allowed to decide how much and how best to use this revenue. If there's preference with the percentage, that's perfectly fine. As Senator Pouliot pointed out, there is a percentage that's used for public safety buildings. So we appreciate this opportunity to speak and answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you, Ms. DeFore. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
We'll now hear from Daniel Stevenson on opposition, followed by Kate Foy. Welcome, Mr. Stevenson. Is Daniel Stevenson with us?
Just promoted him.
Hi there, can you hear me now?
Yep, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. I really want to touch on really three pieces of why I am in opposition to LD 412. You'll probably find throughout my testimony that I am one of the biggest fans of flexibility in Maine's TIF law. But I want to talk today a bit more why that's important, but at the same time, why I'm in opposition to this particular bill. So let me step back for just a moment. The first thing is my experience at both the state and local levels as a bona fide economic development practitioner. You know, I've worked over 2 decades in the state of Maine. I worked first decade right at the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development. And one of my roles there were to oversee the tax incentive programs, including this particular program. Some of the changes that you see in Maine's TIF law today, I have drafted and worked through committee in the legislature. So also as a local economic development practitioner with 8 years in the city of Biddeford, now 3 years in the city of Westbrook, I am intimately familiar with how deals are put together, with local economic development needs, and the importance of economic development tools for the community. Second thing I wanted to touch on is the importance of flexibility, and I want to get at the tax shelter, and that is why I'm in opposition. We'll talk about that in just a second. And finally, the intent of the statute for Maine, and TIFs are different in every state. TIF law is different in every state that has them across the United States. So let's talk first. I've worked in the field of economic and community development for more than 2 decades, both at the state and municipal levels, and I have an extensive knowledge and expertise in public finance, including TIF. As a Maine economic development practitioner, I'm intimately familiar with economic and community issues affecting municipalities throughout the state of Maine. It's in this light I attest that TIF is an important and effective local economic development tool. And it is one of the very few economic development tools available to communities. And I would further, add on to Ms. Dufour that even our toolbox on the larger communities is pretty thin. As you can imagine, Maine communities have varying economic development needs. You just heard testimony a few minutes ago on that. And flexibility in TIF revenue is exceedingly important. However, municipalities that have approved TIF districts and in accompanying programs, they receive a tax shelter to use the revenue for bona fide economic development activities. Further, being a good steward of the program, I do not support the use of TIF revenue to construct or renovate municipal offices. It doesn't fit the intent of the statute and doesn't contribute to the tax base. The proposed use for the funds is currently, as you're aware, prohibited in Maine statute. We have a saying with economic development practitioners, it's that the private sector invests in communities that invest in itself. And Representative Carlo brings up a very good point, so doesn't, Senator, Bailey, the speed dating, right? When the private sector wants to invest, they want to come to a community that has stepped up, a community that has invested in their libraries and perhaps their, where they hold, the city halls and town offices, as well as their trail systems, as well as their sidewalks and infrastructure, amongst other things, because you provide that level playing field to attract private sector capital in your community. However, every time a community receives a TIF, Ms. Dufour was correct, you get that sheltering effect. But that sheltering effect is a tax shift to all the other communities in the state. So when the city of Westbrook has a TIF to promote more jobs, payroll in the economy, and greater tax base, we get that shelter on the behalf of every other community in the state. So there's a history behind why you can't use this to build your ball fields. There's a history of why you can't use this to build municipal office buildings. And I don't want to go into detail for poor Scarborough because they were the poster child for back when at why you can't use it because for municipal buildings, because you are getting that tax shelter against your aid to education, against your municipal revenue sharing, and an increased county tax. And the idea and the intent of this in Maine statute is so we can use these dollars to support bona fide economic development activities. We're afforded that shelter. And because we're afforded that shelter, the goal is to drive new tax base, jobs, and payroll in the economy. So if you use TIF revenue to offset costs or construct municipal office buildings, which are tax exempt, then you're getting that on the backs of you're sheltering that on the backs of all the other communities across the state. That's the big difference here, and the reason why that I'm in opposition to this bill. I will suggest, however, that what Representative Carlo is bringing forward is correct. A lot of these small towns do not have the resources, and it's very difficult, to either rehabilitate or build a new municipal office. Many communities, this is that one large investment that usually goes on the mill rate. And, it's there to stand for many, many years to come. And so I certainly appreciate this bill moving forward. And I understand, the fiscal difficulties a lot of these small communities are in. However, the only other support, I could certainly offer, is that it seems like in this particular case, there's a healthy TIF in one community. That is, those dollars get redirected into infrastructure in other areas. It offers up other opportunity to support different ways to finance municipal building. And I'll end my testimony with that. I'll certainly be here to answer any questions you have. I've been in and around TIFs for a very long time. I know that statute well. I know its applicability in the deals. I know how it works. Just one thought, if Mr. McCubry is still on the line, I believe that as a municipal employee, I have no issues at talking with any of us surrounding communities on economic development issues, and feel free to always reach out to me on any issues you might have. I'd be more than willing to have a conversation. With that, thank you.
Commissioner Stevenson, any questions from members of the committee? I guess I really appreciate your giving us the history and some background on this. What would you say to a town like Hollis that has a mill rate of 14 or 1450 and they're looking at having to rebuild their town hall? I mean, what would you suggest that they do if they don't do something like what they're looking to do with this?
Certainly, I would like to say that, don't hold me to anything I say. This is just the ED. This is not coming from a mayor or administrator of the council. A few options. One option. We call it the Lincoln option. I'm not saying you have to pursue it or what have you. Some communities choose to lease. Private sector comes in, builds a building with multiple uses in it, and the community decides that we're going to lease inside that building. That is one option, so you don't have to come up with the upfront capital cost to build a building. That is just an option. I'm not saying this is the number one option. Two, if you do have a healthy TIF, and it sounds like this community does have a healthy TIF, when you look at earmarking those dollars for these other bona fide, development activities, getting your infrastructure in place, supporting the tax base and growth, it frees up where you could otherwise apply dollars to support your rehabilitation or construction of a new city office. But truthfully, at the end of the day, yeah, it does fall on your tax base. It does fall on the general fund and payments. However, you could use taxes on bond financing clearly would be eligible, right, for a municipal office. But at the same time, with a healthy TIF, such as one in this particular community, you're able to put a lot of those dollars in a lot of other areas that could really offset perhaps some other costs you might have. That being said, I do recognize municipal offices are expensive. I do recognize that it typically, it falls really on the taxpayers, but it also sends a ginormous message to the private sector. We're willing to step up and invest in our community, and there's a cost to doing that. And when we do that and use our TIF money in other areas as well, we really want to attract private capital coming to our community.
Thank you. Representative Sachs has a question.
I do. Thank you so much. And Mr. Stevenson, I appreciate your comments today. The sheltering piece is where I have paused, and I've expressed that to Representative Carlo as well when we discussed the bill. Can you, given your history with TIFs, having been a municipal official that utilized TIFs as well, I have some comfort level with it. But given your history with it, what was the reason for the inclusion of some of the pieces that one might traditionally think of as a municipal responsibility, such as public safety or public works, in that way, trails, et cetera?
Representative Sachs, thank you. That's an excellent question. And the rationale behind it is someone brought up earlier, and I forget who it was, what was Rep. Carlo, Senator, Bailey, Rep. Bailey, Kyle Bailey, is that as your community grows, your services do too. I've talked to the council when I worked in the city of Biddeford as well as here, is that sometimes we like to think the greater our tax base, especially our commercial tax base, we're going to be flush with some cash. Well, guess what? Your costs of your fire department go up and your police department go up, your services go up as well. And so with that, so think about the investment, right? So you might have a large investment somewhere that you want to protect. And through public safety, you're offering that further protection for those private sector investments as the need grows. You can easily call your local PD or fire department, and they'll let you know how many calls they have a year. And you will find out that as your community grows, those calls increase. And it's not just for residential development, it's for commercial development as well. So in order to protect those resources, that is my understanding of where you had that expansion. But even that expansion, as Senator Pouliot was talking about earlier, still has limitations on those. You can't completely finance it. It's just a prorated portion in order to support that investment.
Correct. Thank you very much. That was my understanding as well. My community does, of course, have, being a retail and hospitality center, has a exponential population growth. And so unfortunately, our public safety has to reflect that in terms of staffing for that sort of bump. So thank you very much.
Sure.
Any additional questions to members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Stevenson, for your testimony. We'll now hear from Kate Foy from DECD, followed by Trevor Hustis, who will be speaking in favor, even though he signed up neither for nor against. That was a mistake, I believe. So we'll hear from him after Ms. Foy. Welcome, Ms. Foy. Is Kate Foy with us from DECD?
I did promote her to a panelist, but there are two of her, so I'll try the other one. Okay, both Kate Foys are panelists now.
Is Kate Foy with us?
Working on it. All right, here we go. Sorry, I'm working on cloning myself so I can be on lots of committees at once. We've got a work session on our budget and idea committee today. So when I get it all figured out, I'll let you know. Sorry about that. I have, just so you know, I have two screens. So if I'm not looking at you while I'm reading my testimony, it's because I have another screen over here. Good morning. My name is Kate Foy. Senator Chipman and Representative Terry and members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Kate Foy and I'm the Legislative Liaison for the Department of Economic and Community Development. I'm here today to testify in opposition of LD 412. The statute explicitly prohibits TIF revenues from being used for general conduct of government purposes. Tax increment financing was created to improve economic growth and provide new employment opportunities. Funding municipal capital improvements was never an intended benefit of this program. Sometimes what can be overlooked when considering amendments to the statute is that TIF revenues are from sheltering property taxes, meaning normally with no TIFed parcels, when property taxes are paid, they go into three pots: school, municipality, and revenue sharing. When a municipality TIFs parcels of land, the property taxes paid on the increased value of new development does not go into these three pots. The property taxes from the increased value are deposited into a separate account for allowable project costs with the purpose of supporting commercial and/or industrial economic development. If these projects that do not support economic development as intended under this program, such as constructing or renovating municipal offices, it is the position of the Department of Economic and Community Development that TIF revenues should not be used. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions. And the other Kate Foy is someone in our office, that Tina, who handles all of our TIF projects. So I have her on backup in case there's something I can't answer.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Foy. Is there any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Good to see you. So we'll now hear from Trevor Hustis, who's here to speak in favor of the bill. And then that will conclude all the testimony that we have on 412, and we'll then hear from Representative Williams to introduce to us LD 418. Welcome, Mr. Hustis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do apologize for my technical difficulties in navigating on how to sign up for testimony. And I do appreciate the committee's willingness to take me out of order. Chairman Chipman, Chairwoman Terry, and the honorable members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation, I am Trevor Hustis. As a resident of Hollis and as chairman of Maine's largest regional school unit, MS86, I ask for your support of LD 412. The crux of my argument in support of this bill is to give municipalities local control with any pot of monies available to them. While there certainly are worthy debates to have on what constitutes economic development, these discussions should happen at the town level with decisions made by local boards of selectmen, town councils, and the residents of the town. When I served on the Hollis Planning Board, a selectman joined one of our meetings to inform us, this is about 4 or 5 years ago now, that our town hall was in imminent danger of collapse and action was needed immediately. Now, Hollis is not a wealthy community, as Chairman McCoubry alluded to, with roughly just over 4,000 residents. Our town has been faced with the choice of major unforeseen construction of either a town hall or major structural reinforcement to prevent our town's place of operations from destruction. We chose the latter, which really only gets a few more years of service out of this facility. Since then, we've had to opt to use an industrial trailer similar to those found at construction sites to continue to meet the town's needs. My reason for telling you this is because I feel strongly that the town of Hollis, who is fortunate to have a sizable TIF, should have the opportunity to use any funds available for this sort of major construction. Hollis is growing, and as such, our needs are growing. Personally, I do feel major construction and renovations of municipal facilities do constitute economic development. From an aesthetic standpoint alone, Hollis's town hall is an old house from the mid-20th century, if I'm not mistaken, and is clearly showing its age as mentioned above. Our neighbors of Buxton and Standish have beautiful newer town facilities that give potential businesses coming to the town a sense about their priorities of investing in critical infrastructure and willingness to work with bringing new businesses and residents to the community. I feel Hollis's leadership is passionate about these same priorities, but our town facilities show otherwise. I implore the legislature to give towns the ability to make decisions for themselves on how to best use TIF monies. Thank you for your consideration of my testimony today, and thank you for your willingness to serve in this vital role on behalf of the people of the state of Maine. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Hustis. Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. That now concludes testimony on LD 412. So we'll close out that public hearing, and we'll now open the public hearing for LD 418. This is an act to create a graduated real estate transfer tax that's being sponsored by Representative Williams. So we'll now hear from Representative Williams, followed by Representative Kessler, who's a co-sponsor of the bill. Welcome, Representative Williams. Representative Williams, are you with us? I think you're muted right now.
Here.
There you go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairs Chipman, Terry, and members of the Taxation Committee. I am Representative Lynn Williams. I represent House District 135, which is Bar Harbor, Lemoyne, and Mount Desert. I practically border Representative Carmichael's district, so I look forward to meeting him in the near future. I'm hereby submitting written testimony L418, an act to create a real estate transfer tax. I am the sponsor of the bill. I'd like to offer a bit of background about why I submitted this bill. As a Maine attorney for almost 20 years, I have assisted numerous clients with real estate purchases and sales. And while there are exemptions, such as transfers between certain family members, most of the time a real estate transfer tax, or RET, office, but can also be paid online. And the RET is split half between buyer and seller, although agreement by both parties, one or the other can pay the whole tax. The income from the RET is split 3 ways. 45% at the main housing, 40% goes
I think we lost you.
Yeah.
You're cutting it out. Sorry.
Okay. I'm back.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry. I'm in a hotel in Augusta,
No.
and I think this is an unstable connection. That's what it keeps telling me. So I'll proceed. I think all you missed maybe was 45% goes to the home fund, 45% to Maine Revenue Services, and 10% to the county where the property is located. Over the last 2 years, I have represented a few Maine clients who have been purchasing property in neighboring states, that is, in New Hampshire. And I've learned that both Vermont and the We Don't Tax You state of New Hampshire charge 3 times what Maine charges for the real estate transfer tax. And so it came, when this came to my attention, I thought perhaps we should look at beginning to make a change in our own rate. It has not been changed, the percentage, for 12 years, if not longer. I've always been interested in increasing affordable housing in Maine, and given the distribution of the rent, I decided to the home fund, I decided to propose a modest increase in the rate. In drafting a bill, I also thought that giving a small benefit to those purchasing homes at the lower end of the spectrum who were planning to live year-round in those homes would align with the goal of increasing affordable housing. So the language that I proposed initially and that the reviser drafted would change the RET as follows. It decreases the rate of the RET on the first $150,000 of a primary residence to $1.50 for each $500 or fractional part there. And increases the rate for everything over that to $2.50 per $500. The current rate is $2.20 per $500. So this is not a major increase. At a meeting I had with the registrars of deeds, however, I was informed that the lower rate would result in a loss of income to those counties that have a preponderance of properties sold at the lower end of the price range. That is, in many ways, our rural counties, as opposed to York and Cumberland, which are seeing very high-end sales. In addition, I gave thought to adding a higher RET percentage for those sales at the higher end of the real estate spectrum, such as sales at $500,000 and a second level for sales at $1 million, given the significant increase in the sales prices currently, excuse me, which you have probably all read about. In no way do I want to support a bill that will cause counties to lose funds. I also want to do an analysis that shows how much the bill would bring in under various scenarios. In order to do that, those of us working on this bill need accurate data for the most recent year, 2020, of real estate sales by county and by category, whether residential, commercial, or unimproved land. My colleague, Representative Kessler, has been seeking this data thus far unsuccessfully, and he will be speaking, I believe, next about this issue. Due to the fact that we have not yet been able to create an amendment to LD 418 that would include reasonable rates that would raise funds both for the home fund and the general fund, but not burden some Maine counties with a loss of income, I'm requesting that this bill be scheduled for work session at such time that we have gotten the data we are seeking, analyzed it, and drafted an amendment to the bill. Thank you for your consideration. And I'll take any questions anyone has.
Great. Thank you, Representative Williams. Questions from members of the committee? Senator Pouliot, go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Williams. I am a realtor and see these fees constantly. And it's easy to calculate, you know, when a buyer or seller is asking you how much their transfer tax is going to be, you know, it's $220 per thousand. You can do the math. A lot of times people want to know how much their closing costs going to be. One of my concerns, and I've been talking with a lot of title attorneys, closing offices about this, is just breaking down a rate for below 150 or above. And then what do you do, you know, if the contract started out at, you know, 200,000 or more realistically, let's say 160, but then the final sales price dropped to 145. And I mean, I just, it seems to me that having one continuous rate across the board might be easier, but have you contemplated that at all or talked to that at all? And I did hear in your testimony that you think it was your assertion that homes that are under 150,000 are for year-round residents, and somehow that homes over 150 wouldn't be for year-round residents, or that homes under 150 would only be for year-round residents and not part-time residents. So I'm just wondering what the thought process was behind, picking a number 150 and then having separate figures for that.
Yes, Senator Pulio, thank you for your questions, and I appreciate your experience in the industry, because this is a little complicated for people who have not been immersed in it. A few things. As I said, my initial idea was to incentivize and get a little break to low-end buyers, because as an act to support affordable housing, people into the housing market who are of limited means, basically. And so that was the idea about that. If they are not, if someone's buying a house for 150,000,
We've lost you, Representative Williams.
okay, what about that broadband committee? So if someone's buying a house at the 150,000 level, for example, but it's going to be a seasonal property, then they wouldn't qualify for this. The idea of so now I'll address the idea of the graduated tax. We are in, we've gone a long way with computers. And I'm not saying I'm the biggest tech person. I'm not young, and sometimes I need a young person to help me with it. But that said, when I was researching Vermont and New Hampshire, in Vermont, you go to Vermont, you're buying a house, either your lawyer or your realtor goes to this website, and it's a questionnaire. And you enter the price of the house, you enter the county it's in, you enter whether they have questions. And then bingo, at the end, the real estate transfer tax number pops up. Part of the issue, I think, in Maine, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, or as when we go into work session, if this is incorrect, but I believe this is left up to the counties in Maine. And I empathize with the registrars of deeds who have said to me, this is a big burden, this will be so complicated, our county will have to spend extra money to get a new computer system and so on. That might be something that we want to look at, putting allowing or requiring each individual county their whole thing on calculating the rent and getting the income in for that. So I hope that answers your questions.
Does that answer your question, Senator Pouliot?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Great. We got a question from Representative Bickford. I think you're muted, Representative Bickford. You got to unmute yourself.
You're right. I'm sorry.
Right.
My question is, looking at taxing residents at a different rate than non-residents, And I question the constitutionality of that, taxing one group different than another. Can you respond to that?
Yes, I can at this point give citations to various cases, but for work session, I will provide that. But essentially, there are states, and I refer to the aforementioned Vermont, that have been doing that. And it has not been challenged in federal court. But that is a very legitimate question, and I will gather information on that, legal and court case information, to address that when this goes to work session.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Representative Williams, for presenting the bill. We look forward to working with you on it. We'll now hear testimony from co-sponsors of the bill, starting with Representative Kessler, followed by Representative Morales. Welcome, Representative Kessler.
Thank you. Good morning, Senator Chipman. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and well-dressed members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. My name is Chris Kessler, and I represent House District 32, which is a part of South Portland and a sliver of Cape Elizabeth. And I am here to testify in strong favor of LD 418 on the following premise: that we are in the midst of a housing crisis, and we must do everything within our power to fix it. Demand for housing is at record levels, and we are in short supply, as everybody knows. For 5 years in a row, a majority of Maine households can no longer afford the median price of a home. For 20 years in a row, a majority of Maine households cannot afford the median price for a two-bedroom apartment. Home and rental prices have been soaring in southern Maine for years, and now, fueled by the COVID-19 pandemic, housing affordability has become a serious issue in nearly every corner of the state. Families who have lived in their communities for generations are being forced out because they can't bid as high as someone from Boston or New York looking for their dream vacation home. They can't compete with those looking to start anew in Maine, flocking here because of our quality of life, myself included. For those Mainers who do own property and are barely getting by, living conditions can range from substandard to dangerous. This is due to a lack of money to mitigate hazards or keep buildings in good repair. The same story is playing out in different ways in different communities, but it affects us all. In the debate about how to solve the problem of housing affordability, a common refrain has been that we need to increase supply. In a free market, it's the basic law of supply and demand. We must build and rehabilitate more housing units to meet demand so prices will stabilize. Much like other infrastructure, such as broadband, we find ourselves needing to subsidize building out where private industry has no incentive to do so themselves. If we want to provide affordable housing for our people, we must subsidize it to build it. The free market by design will not make it happen on its own. We constantly hear the warning of unintended consequences of any law we may pass. Our current housing crisis is the unintended consequence of treating housing as a commodity rather than essential infrastructure for the health, welfare, and safety of our people. But this is where we are, and we need to do the best we can with what we have to work with. One tool we do have to work with is something called the Housing Opportunities for Maine Fund, or the Home Fund. The Home Fund was created in 1982 to provide Maine housing with a flexible financial resource to address the state's affordable housing needs. The fund is used to subsidize the cost of building affordable housing, along with other necessary tools like emergency shelter and housing assistance, home financing, and home repair. And the real estate transfer tax is what fuels this important work. The Home Fund is not being funded to the level required to tackle the size of the problem at hand. We need to do more, and we needed to do it yesterday. And this is the reason for the introduction of LD 418. There is consensus that we need to increase revenue for the home fund, and we're in favor of changing the tax rate to a structure that shifts the burden away from those who can least afford it, the very people that this fund is trying to help. That was the intent of the printed language of the bill. And since the time of printing to this public hearing, stakeholders have identified problems with the proposed formula and how it would be implemented. And as much as we would all like to start with a bill that has the kinks worked out and is wrapped in a bow to present to the committee, our time and resources as legislators are limited. And I want to express that I'm fully dedicated to working with all stakeholders and this committee to figure out the right formula and the logistics for implementation. And we've identified two problems while working on this bill so far. We as legislators haven't yet been given access to the granular sales data that we need to run new formulas. We only have access to publicly available median home sales data, which is limited in its use for this purpose. We need time to work together with the registers of deeds and Maine Revenue Services to do this. Our goal is to understand if we can implement a formula that raises overall revenue while giving tax relief to those who are buying property in Maine's poorest communities. If we can achieve this, I believe we should do it. And number two, in discussion with the registers of deeds, I've received feedback that implementation of a tiered structure would be onerous to all parties involved, would require an enormous amount of work that would slow their process down and may be technically impossible for them to do. In response to this feedback, I request that the committee and stakeholders give us the opportunity to understand step by step how the real estate transfer tax is implemented, who is involved, how it gets calculated, and how the data is transferred and stored. Because we need to understand how truly onerous or easy it could possibly be to implement. And for the committee's consideration that I have provided in my written testimony, there's a link for you. I share with you a spreadsheet that I created in just a few hours that calculates the real estate transfer tax with up to 3 tiers. It's programmed not only to calculate the rate for a sample home and how it impacts the median home sale price, but you can customize the price point and the rate for each tier. And if I can do this for free in a few hours in a spreadsheet, I'm confident that we can come up with a solution that doesn't require a large fiscal note, if any. So in closing, I cannot stress enough that the status quo in regard to housing is not working. We are in the midst of a housing crisis, and we need every tool in the toolbox to address it. The home fund is one of those essential tools, and it's time that we devote the resources needed to meet the immensity of the problem before us. Thank you for your time, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Representative Kessler. Are there questions from members of the committee? We have a question from Representative Hanley, followed by Representative Terry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Representative Kessler. That's a very good presentation. My question is, of course, how much of a responsibility does the state of Maine have to build other people's houses for them, I guess? You know, I mean, that's a kind of a philosophical question, but more importantly, not more importantly, but my question is, how much is the actual dollar amount collected per year now for this home fund? And by what amount would this new formula increase that year over year?
Thank you for the questions, Representative Hanley, and good to see you outside of the EUT horseshoe. So to answer your first question, that is a philosophical question. That is the question of, what do you believe the role of government to be? And I believe that the role of government should be to provide for the general welfare and health and safety of its people. And so that's my philosophy. And there's certain economic conditions that have been outside of people's control, where they find themselves unable to get out of the pit that they're in. And so where we see a problem and we have the power to do something about it, I believe we have a responsibility to do something about it. As to the exact amount of the home fund, it's varied from year to year. I don't have that off the top of my head, but we can certainly get that for work session. But it is in the range of the tens of millions of dollars. I don't have an exact figure at the moment.
Madam Chair, may I have another question?
Yes, Mr. Hanley, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Chipman, sorry about that.
Take it as a, thank you.
Okay, yeah. Can we have that information for the work session? I think it's important to know those values.
Oh, and I neglected to answer, there was another question that you had.
It would be, what would be the projected increase with this,
yes.
with this legislation? How much would it increase that fund?
Yep.
On a yearly basis?
So that has yet to be determined. If I could have my way, I would quadruple it. But that, I think, is a policy decision that this committee will have to grapple with. Certainly, we need to do much more than we're doing now. So.
Great. We have a couple more questions from Representative Terry, followed by Representative Sachs.
I actually have, thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually don't have a question, but I do have a recommendation while you are writing your amendments to this and determining formulas for for towns and counties to use when making this happen. Our Maine Revenue Service is in the midst of putting together an entirely new, very updated, keeping in line with this century computer system. I think they would be incredibly helpful. It would be very helpful for you to talk to them while you're doing these calculations. And, I would share with them your, quick spreadsheet that you put together, just so they can see how quickly and easily it can be done. But I would definitely recommend giving the office a call and seeing if you can speak with someone there.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative Terry. We have a question from Representative Sachs, followed by Representative Perry.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Hello, Representative Kessler and Representative Williams as well. I empathize with the broadband. I'm keeping my video off most of the time so that I can continue to have connection. My question to you and Representative Hanley, if you want to talk about sort of the federal government destabilizing the BRAP and housing shelter program so that we're in this mess. Happy to have that policy discussion with you. But Representative Kessler, you and Representative Williams have talked about an inability to get data to be able to further your goals. Have you had some commitments from those entities that you need to be able to have the data for whenever the work session is moving forward?
Thank you for the question, Representative Sachs. There has been no commitment as of yet, at least from my understanding, that some of that, or that granular sales data is very much under wraps. And I personally have not wrapped my head around the actual logistics and legal framework around the privacy of those numbers. So I hope that we can get a commitment from them on that. But that's the answer to that question.
Yeah, and which entity are you hoping to get that from?
Well, so as I understand it, those numbers do live with the registers of deeds, and I do not know to what extent that exists with Maine Revenue Services.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate y'all tackling this issue. It sounds like it's very complicated in many fronts. So thanks for at least exploring that and working with the committee around it.
Representative Perry, followed by Representative Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative, for being here and presenting today. And I too have been keeping the video off to help improve my audio. I have been listening and paying attention, but in today's Bangor Daily, there's a story of rural Maine County seeing influx of home buyers during the pandemic. And the numbers show that in Aroostook County, available properties are down by 2/3 from 1,000 to 360. And over the past 5 years, sales average prices have almost doubled from 53,000 to 97,000. So I'm just curious if anything we do as a guy, and this is a question to you, Representative, but maybe Maine Revenue for a work session, it would have an opinion. If the state invests more in the home fund or in ways to help people buy homes, and it does come at the cost of a slightly higher real estate transfer tax, are the sellers likely to get any increase back by higher sales prices by having more buyers in the market? And is, I guess, what I'm curious about. Any thoughts on it?
Representative Perry, that's an interesting question that I would also like to tease out. Certainly sellers in this market are experiencing a windfall because of the demand. And interestingly, in research on the bill, in the statute, it says that specifically the RET is supposed to be split 50-50, but that never happens. It's always privately negotiated. So that's also an area that should be looked at too. Just when we are looking at real estate, or a regulation of the real estate market, when a market is out of control, how can we regulate a market to not cause damage? So.
Additional questions, Representative Sachs, do you have another question?
No, thank you. Sorry.
Seeing no additional questions, thank you, Representative Kessler, for your testimony and answering all those questions from committee members.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to working with you on the bill, and hope to see you at the work session. We'll now hear testimony from Representative Morales, and then we'll followed by Colin Ryan from Community Housing of Maine.
Good morning, everyone. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. I'm submitting my testimony in support of this bill because, as has been mentioned before, it seeks to increase funding for affordable housing, and we are absolutely in a crisis today. And before I'm not going to read everything in my testimony, but I wanted to let you all know, and some of you do know, that many members of the House and Senate have been working really hard on a comprehensive housing approach since about September, and really identifying, what the needs are. We've got some emergency needs. We've got some stability and security needs. We know essentially that we need to look at housing as infrastructure, as Representative Kessler and Williams said, and that we are down 20,000 units of housing, according to the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition. Maine Housing also has stated that as well. So we know that there is a huge need, and that in order for us to get there, this bill is a big piece of that. So just to kind of share with you what I do in my day job, which really drives some of the work that I'm doing here at the legislature, is I work at the Quality Housing Coalition, and we provide supportive housing to those who are experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of experiencing homelessness. And today there are just too many families in crisis for me to tell you all about all of them, but there are 3 mothers that I just want to share a little bit with you about them. And I think about them every day because they all have these challenging situations that is no fault of their own. And it just really lays bare the pandemic and the crisis which existed previous to this pandemic. So each mother is unhoused, they each have children, and they're each living in a motel because they can't find or afford housing. The first mother has a 3-year-old daughter. She is new to this country, having barely escaped alive from a brutal regime. The motel doesn't have a kitchen for her to cook for her daughter, and she doesn't have a car to drive to the nearest grocery store. When they are hungry, they walk to the nearest gas station for food. Someone recently offered her a couch to sleep on while she waits for housing, which will take some time, but she was advised to stay in the motel so she doesn't lose the general assistance that she's receiving. As some of you may know, the way that general assistance work, it's each municipality may interpret it differently. So we don't want to do anything to risk her losing her opportunity to get housing. The second mother, she has 2 school children. She's also living in a motel. She has a car that she can barely keep in good repair because her salary is not enough to pay for rent, food, and car maintenance. She's constantly worried that she'll be pulled over for an out tail light and have to pay a fine that she can't afford because this kind of thing happens to her a lot. Her salary is just above the poverty limit that would qualify for assistance, and she is hanging on to her job by a thread as hard as she can. She also has an eviction history due to domestic violence that she faced, which is an insurmountable barrier to applying for housing. She also didn't have an attorney represent her during her eviction. And we know that according to a Maine Affordable Housing Coalition study recently, that those tenants without an attorney, those tenants with an attorney are 85% more likely to avoid eviction. We also know from that study that the majority of folks who suffered from evictions were only behind about $1,500 or less in arrears. The third mom I want to tell you about, she's got 3 children. She's pregnant with twins. She's desperately searching for a 4-bedroom apartment that she can afford with her unemployment. But there are no 4-bedroom units of housing to rent almost anywhere. Certainly no affordable units of that size. Also, this family is justice involved, which is another insurmountable barrier to find them housing. So I just want to share a couple of data points with you all just to really hone in on the crisis that we are in. According to Maine Housing, we invest historically as a state 0.00643% of our budget on housing infrastructure. We need today, according to Maine Housing, 20,000 units of affordable housing to meet the needs of Maine households. Currently today, up from 19,000 in 2019, there are 25,000 plus Maine households on the waiting list for Section 8 housing vouchers. Those are federal vouchers. And that waiting list is about 3 to 5 years. Maine has no state voucher program to meet the needs of these households. We build typically with federal tax credits between 200 and 250 affordable units every year. On average, it costs about $7,500 to house a household per year with federal vouchers. 53% of the children that we incarcerate in Maine are not there because they're a public safety risk. According to a recent study done last year, they're there because they don't have any homes. We have about 5,500 people who are homeless. And we already, and I think this is a point to make when we talk about where do we invest our money, because we are already investing an enormous amount of money in the homelessness system. And it's an uncoordinated system. And what we see is that folks are ricocheting, and Cullen Ryan will speak next to this because I've heard him speak eloquently about the issues of homelessness, but I'll just say it briefly, that we spend millions of dollars on the shelter system, on the jail system, policing folks on the street because they're homeless, in the district courts, in the emergency rooms, in our treatment facilities. We spend an enormous amount keeping people homeless, and it is far less expensive if we house them, particularly for those who need those kinds of supports. And I'll leave that to Mr. Ryan to talk more about what that looks like. So I'm really here to support any version of this bill that would raise revenue for affordable housing and the supports, you know, that 120,000 Mainers approximately are at poverty levels or just above the poverty level. Those are the folks who are really experiencing, and they're in every one of our districts, they're experiencing this housing crisis. And I just want to say that, you know, this is a crisis that's harming the economic and educational potential of Maine families, children, students, seniors, and workers. And it's really time that as a state we name it. We know it's been named according to the Economic Recovery Committee as one of the high priorities and recommendations for us to move ahead and become economically sustainable as a state. We know that it's been addressed by the Maine Climate Council, housing as one of the priorities as well. But it's time that we name it and that we work together to solve it, because we absolutely can solve it. And this bill is a part of that solution. So thank you very much.
Other questions from members of the committee for Representative Morales? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Representative Morales. We'll now hear testimony from Cullen Ryan from Community Housing of Maine, followed by Frank D'Alessandro from Maine Equal Justice. Welcome, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Senator Chipman and Representative Terry and members of the Taxation Committee. Thank you for having me here today and allowing me to speak in favor of LD 418. My name is Cullen Ryan. I'm Executive Director of Community Housing in Maine. We're the largest housing provider for homeless populations in the state. I've been working in the field of homelessness for 34 years, so I've seen lots of patterns, and I'm happy to talk about those, but also involved in the Statewide Homeless Council and the continuum of care. And as I said, I'm testifying in support of this, and I wanted to explain the real estate transfer tax is the mechanism, it is the tool that's used to create affordable housing and to do a whole lot of other things in Maine. It has been proven redundantly it costs less to house people, as Representative Morales was describing, costs less to house people than to keep them homeless. And it's because these folks will ricochet through all of our most expensive emergency systems while homeless. And we've proven that once we house people, they stop ricocheting, they stop touching all of these systems. So it saves an awful lot of money. It costs actually less to house somebody than it does to have them stay in a homeless shelter on a per diem basis over the course of a month. That cost alone, homeless shelter is more expensive. What we know is that they're touching these other systems. The real estate transfer tax really is a leveraging tool. If you heard of a bank account that paid 5%, you might think, oh, that's pretty good right now. And but a stock that would give 10 or 20%, you'd be pretty excited about. The home fund produces a 1,000% return on its investment. For every dollar that we invest, we get $10 that comes into Maine in the form of private and public investments into housing. So it's an enormous tool that we have. And unfortunately, what we've done in the past is seen this as just a pot of money to sort of dip into when we haven't had enough money. That's like burning a $10 bill for every dollar. What this bill does is say, let's modestly increase this and have more of these resources that can leverage 10 times themselves in housing development for Maine. And I can explain that. I'm happy to if you want me to tell you exactly how that leveraging works. As described, there's an overall shortage of affordable housing in Maine. Representative Morales gave some statistics. And I will say that the rate of housing that we've been developing has actually been historically lower. We've been developing at a rate of about 180 affordable housing units a year. This year, because of the bill that recently passed, we're going to see an increased activity of housing development, getting closer to that 220 that Representative Morales talked about. But still, that's a slow way to get to 20,000 units. We're not getting there fast. And when you look at supportive housing, the kind of housing that people who use the most expensive emergency systems, we've been building that at a rate of about 12 units a year. And the funding for that comes from the home fund. So we have a ways to go in terms of catching up with the supply of housing that we need to get people housed. And what's happening is that people will have a rental subsidy in hand where they want to get housed. They're in homelessness, they're in desperate situations, and they exhaust all the time limits that they have for using that rental subsidy to find housing because they can't find an apartment that will take them. There's just none available. So people are stuck in homelessness. We're moving people into shelters, but we're not moving them out of them. So that's a huge catastrophe that is looming. A couple examples I wanted to talk about just from my organization. The Home Fund allowed 7 folks with cerebral palsy to move out of elderly nursing care facilities where the roommates were 95-year-old folks with dementia or Alzheimer's into their own apartments where they've been able to go to college and pursue just being part of the community. This is up in Bangor. And this leveraged federal Section 8 funds, $5 million in federal grant funds, and allowed these folks independence in the community, a really good thing, that a really small amount of money allowed to happen. It also allowed 45 formerly homeless veterans to be, most of them chronically homeless. One of them was homeless for 15 years outside with his dog, and he moved into a house, and he stayed there ever since, now for 11 years. They've been able to live in decent apartments in downtown locations like Biddeford, Portland, Augusta, Waterville, and Bangor. where they could work, receive medical support, maintain sobriety, and be part of the community. Federal Section 8 was leveraged out of this, as well as federal VA funds that supported support services as well. And then finally, the Home Fund allowed the development of 34 confidentially located apartments serving victims of domestic violence so that they could keep their kids safe, develop skills for success in relationships, and be able to go to school and pursue employment so that they would be economically successful. So I support this bill. It will increase the resources that we can put into all these important resources. And I'm happy to explain in any detail how that leveraging happens, why it averages out to actually 11 to 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan, for your testimony. Any questions from members of the committee? Yes, Representative Bickford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, we have an $8.4 billion budget. Why haven't you and why aren't you lobbying the chief executive to include this in her budget? With $8.4 billion, I'm sure that there are ways she could fund this for you without raising taxes on anyone.
Yeah, we actually work hard. The Statewide Homeless Council is advisory to the governor and to Maine Housing and to DHHS and to Department of Corrections. And we actually have worked with them to come up with blueprints of exactly what we could use to help us end homelessness. And we do ask for resources. The Home Fund is really the only tool that has been allowed to happen. And as I described, many times it's been rated, it's been brought down to almost zero in past years since 1983. And last year was the first year that it wasn't really touched a lot, which was great. It brought about $12 million and allowed that to be leveraged for housing development. A relatively small amount of money when we compare what we need, but that money, amplified by 10 or 11 times itself, has made a huge difference in allowing us to right the ship and have places for people to live within their communities.
So has she given you a reason why she won't include this funding in her budget?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Ryan, for your testimony. Appreciate it. We'll now hear from Frank D'Alessandro from Maine Equal Justice, followed by Sarah Austin. Mr. D'Alessandro, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Frank D'Alessandro. I am, good afternoon, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and members of the Committee on Taxation. I'm the Litigation and Policy Director of Maine Equal Justice. We're a civil legal services organization, and we work with and for people with low income seeking solutions to poverty through policy, education, and legal representation. And thank you for the opportunity to offer written and oral testimony in support of LD 418. I just have to share this. I got on earlier today and I had the opportunity to see my son testify. And that was a very unique experience. But I appreciate the questions you asked him. So we support this bill with the amendments proposed by its sponsors to create a graduated system to ensure that Maine low and middle income homeowners are taxed at fair rates, while those with the ability to purchase more expensive and luxury homes contribute at higher rates. So one of the things that we propose is that the increased revenues be credited to Maine State Housing and Home Fund specifically for rental assistance to meet the urgent needs of Maine renters. Maine tenants are in a desperate need for long-term rental assistance. Even before the pandemic, over half of low-income households paid more than half of their income towards rent, which makes them severely rent burdened. And we all know that any unexpected expense has the potential of pushing those households into poverty and as you all into homelessness. And as you've all heard before, the price to the state and to the human beings who experience homelessness is extreme. People who become homeless lose all their wealth. Whatever little wealth they have, they lose it. Children are unable to access housing, education the way they need to. And the cost to society of bringing that person back out of homelessness is more expensive than paying for the person's rent in the first place. And as Mr. Ryan just testified, once you house people, they become successful. The ability, keeping people housed has a very significant positive impact on the household, the family, the children in the family, and society at large. Also, there is a racial equity lens here, okay? Right now, the 26% of Maine's homeless population, this is according to Maine State Housing Authority's numbers, 26% of Maine's homeless population is Black or African American. That compares to 1% of the overall population in the state. And the pandemic has just made the situation worse. According to the Maine Association of Realtors, according to their report, there's been a 22% increase in median sales price between the fall of 2019 to the fall of 2020. That's a 1-year increase. And that is not only pricing having an impact on homeowners, all right, but it is impacting renters and raising rents. And we are concerned, as are many landlords, that people who would lose housing at this point are going to be permanently priced out of the market. And that has a real impact on the individual, but it also has an impact on the state at large and the ability of the state to retain the workforce it needs to come out of this pandemic. Also, I mean, I've submitted written testimony. There is evidence that, good evidence, that a modest increase to the real estate transfer tax is not going to slow or dampen Maine's real estate market. Studies from other states have found that modest increases have almost no effect on market behavior. And also, to answer a question, according to what we see, the Maine's real estate transfer tax has only been adjusted 3 times since it was enacted in 1967, and the last time was 1993. So we believe our state must address the fact that while business is booming in the real estate market, many of our community members are struggling to stay in their homes. Implementing an increase to the real estate transfer tax for the home fund can capture some of this growth without harming the real estate market and by helping the people most vulnerable to rising unaffordable rents. And that we believe this is an equitable way to ensure our state is not leaving anyone behind, and that we have the resources and retain and attract the workforce that we need to come out of this pandemic. The people, the market forces that are driving this dramatic increase in housing prices is primarily from people who are attracted to Maine, but are coming with jobs, are able to work remotely. They're not the people that we need and we're going to need for the jobs that Maine is going to need to fill in order to come out of this recession. So I think people have talked about, and other people who are going to come behind me are going to talk about the need for more housing, and that's definitely true. We're 20,000 units behind, even as Mr. Ryan testified. If we increase it by 200 or slightly over 200 units per year, that's still a long way away. And I don't even want to do the math. about how many times 200 goes into 20,000, but it's not a small number. However, one of the problems that we see at Maine Equal Justice is that even the so-called affordable housing that's created through the low-income tax credit project, for example, is only affordable to low-income Mainers if it comes with rental assistance, either in the form of rental assistance that's going to be recognized as available by housing providers, such as Section 8 or another type of a voucher program. And that's why we're really advocating that this money be used to provide that type of rental assistance so that the low-income tax credit and other housing that is created is actually affordable to low-income Mainers. Also, I think you're going to hear about problems with general fund sweeps, that in the past, the budget has been proposed and money has been taken out of the home fund so that it can't be used for its purpose of providing affordable housing to Mainers.
D'Alessandro, we had another committee member bring to my attention about our 3-minute time limit. So just wanted to ask if you could bring us to a conclusion with all due respect.
Sure. I just think that, first of all, I wanted to thank Governor Mills for not taking money out of the home fund. But I think also by designating the money for a specific purpose, such as rental assistance, and spending that money consistently for rental assistance, it makes it less likely that the fund will be raided. And also, obviously, any budget proposal proposed by the governor has to be approved by the legislature, and the legislature can decide not to allow that portion of the budget proposal to go forward. I just want one thing, and this is in response to a question raised earlier about the constitutional question of raising the tax for units where there's someone that's a permanent home. There is a case out there that found that inequitable fees for development that was used almost exclusively for people from out of state was unconstitutional. However, I don't think that that's a problem with this bill, because this is a broad-based bill. It would provide for apply to the other state, to the entire state. And so it's not specifically designed in violation of the Constitutional Commerce Clause. So I don't think that this bill is a problem for that. And I just want to agree that affordable housing is a bipartisan issue. It's a Democratic issue, it's a Republican issue. And I think that certainly the administration can be doing more, but the legislature could be doing more, and both parties can be doing more to take a stand to make it so that the resources necessary to provide affordable housing of high quality to all Maine residents is accomplished.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. D'Alessandro. Questions to members of the committee? Look like we have any questions. Thank you for being with us. We'll now hear from Sarah Austin. And then
Mr. Chair.
Those in opposition, starting with Aaron.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Senator Pouliot.
Yeah, I had a question, but you might not have seen my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, do you have a question for Mr. D'Alessandro?
Thanks. Yeah. First, Mr. D'Alessandro, thank you for your testimony. And we are well pleased as a committee to have your son working within the department. He does a fantastic job with some very difficult material.
Thank you. That's always great to hear. Thank you.
I know that last session, Speaker Fecto and I co-sponsored a low-income housing tax credit, which was passed with broad support. I know that you were supportive of that. I'm just wondering, whether this particular mechanism is the best way for us to ensure that additional housing is being built. And the reason I ask that is because the Home Fund is a tremendous program. And, I think that we ought to do all that we can to make sure it doesn't get rated in the future, but it also gets utilized for other things like first-time home buyer credits and so forth, you know, which are great programs. You know, a lot of my clients use those programs, and I'm very supportive of the different things that the Home Fund does. But it doesn't, I'm just wondering, I guess, what your opinion is on whether or not that would be the best mechanism for the creation of new units, or if we ought to be looking at other avenues to create more units.
So I do think that we should do as much as we can and have a broad-based strategy. So I do think the Home Fund plays a really important role. I do think that, I mean, like we're advocating for that this increased money be used for rental assistance to make sure that like low-income tax credits do meet the needs for low-income tenants. However, I mean, I do think, you know, I do believe that this is the moment, right, for this legislature and for the governor to act together to come up with a long-term affordable housing plan for the state. You know, the pandemic has, you know, uncovered a bunch of problems. Problems are being made worse. We need affordable housing in order to maintain our workforce and attract the workforce we're going to need going forward. I think the Home Fund, I don't know that it matters that, you know, it doesn't have to be the Home Fund, but that's the mechanism we have. And that's something that's in place now that we can use. I mean, I'm all in favor of, you know, developing a bigger plan, right? That's going to really solve the problem on all levels. I mean, you know, 200 units, as you know, I mean, I know you know this better than I do, Senator, but right, I mean, it's not just creating units, right, of affordable housing units requires funding for the housing units, but also requires a workforce that can construct the housing units, and it requires zoning options which allow the housing units to be built, and it requires support services for people who are going to be housed there, especially people most at risk of homelessness. And so there's a bunch of moving parts, and this is one of the things. And I think by the thing about the real estate transfer tax, especially now with the increase in the housing prices right now, and the evidence which suggests that it doesn't, a modest increase in the real estate transfer tax doesn't impact market behaviors around housing, that this is a way we can raise money for a really specific need without harming the economy in any way. And with really helping the economy by creating affordable housing so people can stay in Maine and work in Maine and avoid homelessness. I'm all in favor of a larger plan. I think, you know, I think a complete plan, not including creation of housing, though, is about $117 million a year to get everybody off the Section 8 waiting list.
Yeah, I mean, which is really in part what we're trying to attack with the LIHTC credit. However, I agree with you that, you know, we're still not building enough to meet demand. The only thing is that this, you know, I'm wondering, you know, your thoughts on if we're making the cost of real estate more expensive in driving up the cost, that reduces affordability. So, you know, even we might look at this like, you know, someone buying a home over 150,000 might, in some folks' opinion, have more means to pay an increase in a tax. And this impact of affordability has the net effect of, you know, reducing options for people in terms of what may or may not work for them. I mean, I've seen people who have as little as $100, left over after a transaction when they're paying their closing costs. And, if they're buying a home now that's, more than 150,000, it's going to increase the cost. And in southern Maine, Cumberland County, York County, and so forth, I mean, we're talking very, very modest homes, 850, 900 square foot ranches that are trading for in excess of $150,000. So these aren't some McMansions somewhere that people are buying, as a second home out of luxury, So I'm just wondering, your thoughts on that in terms of like impacting affordability for people, because it just, to me, it seems like this doesn't get at that. What we need is more inventory, which would reduce pricing. And so I don't see a mechanism in this bill. Maybe I'm missing something. You can help me find it. And I guess I could have asked this question of any proponent, but where is there the guarantee of an increase in inventory by way of this mechanism?
Well, so to answer the first part of your question, I mean, we are in favor, Maine Equal Justice is in favor of a graduated real estate transfer tax, which would not increase the real estate transfer tax for homeowners who purchase homes below a certain price. And I think we need to think about what that price level is. Okay. The second piece, I do generally agree that we need more. I mean, I definitely agree we need more housing, but we need affordable housing. So I know in Portland, for example, there has been a real increase in the number of units, but those units have actually decreased the number of affordable units. Those are high-end condominiums and have actually eliminated some places where I know my former clients lived. So what we need to focus on is the creation of affordable housing. And in my view, one of the things that is missing, has been missing up until now concerning the creation of affordable housing through low-income tax credit and other means, is that for low-income tenants, those units are still not affordable unless they come with some sort of rental assistance. And I think that the way that this bill gets at that issue of affordable housing is actually by providing rental assistance to people for new units. It, in effect, increases the availability of affordable housing units for low-income people. And I do, look, I mean, we need 15 to 20,000 new units, right? I mean, I think there are other people who know this better than me, but I think there's a workforce issue too about creating that many units all at once, how quickly those units can be created. But I think that this bill gets at the problem of affordability by increasing the real estate transfer tax in our proposal to increase rental assistance to low-income families so that they can afford the new housing that's being created.
Additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. D'Alessandro, for your testimony, and thank you, Senator Pouliot, for pointing out the connection between the two D'Alessandros. I was wondering if there was a connection there, so thank you. We'll now hear testimony from those, from Sarah Austin in favor, and then we'll go to those in opposition, starting with Aaron Bolster. Welcome, Sarah Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and members of the Taxation Committee. My name is Sarah Austin. I'm a tax and budget policy analyst at the Maine Center for Economic Policy. And I'm here to testify in favor of LD 418, which would create a fair real estate transfer tax and could bolster state funding for affordable housing programs. I know a lot of folks have talked today about the importance of affordable housing, and we certainly support a lot of that, but I will talk more about the tax side of this. And the big concern here is the question mark on how much this would change the total amount of revenue that we bring in through this tax. And our position would be that this should be either maintaining or increasing the amount of revenue that's available for affordable housing. So right now, the real estate transfer tax is assessed when a piece of real estate changes ownership and is assessed at $2.20 for every $500 in purchase price. This bill would alter the structure of the transfer tax to create two brackets with different tax rates for primary residences, and $1.50 for every $500 in purchase price up to $150,000, which is a decrease in cost. And then for any amount of purchase price that's above $150,000, the tax rate would be $2.50 for every $500 in purchase price. Below is a comparison chart included with my written testimony that you can reference that shows what this looks like for primary residences that have this progressive tax split under the proposed bill. The real estate transfers for primary residences valued at more than $500,000 would pay a higher transfer tax under LD 418 as it's currently written, and transfers valued at lower than $500,000 would pay less under this proposal. So certainly anyone buying low-income housing would be paying less under the proposed bill, so long as it is their primary housing, which I think we can assume if they are searching for affordable housing that they are unlikely to be buying a second home. So for all real estate transfers that are not primary residences, the increase in transfer tax is from $2.20 per $500 in purchase price up to $2.50 per $500 in purchase price, which is a pretty modest increase. The 30-cent increase represents an effective tax rate increase of 0.06 percentage points of the purchase price. So for $1 million property, that means a $600 increase in their tax on top of the $4,400 that they would be paying right now. Maine is certainly experiencing a record-breaking housing market, and just as many low and middle income families are struggling to secure safe and affordable housing. Not only are low and middle income families competing with more buyers than ever in a state with limited housing stock, but prices for homes are also higher than they've ever been. And furthermore, Maine is a state that has a really high level of people seeking second homes and non-resident purchases. So this bill would go a long way in making a transfer tax that is better structured, asking more of those with higher wealth, and would likely increase the resources available, or at least we would hope that it would increase the resources available for affordable housing programs in the state through the real estate transfer tax. So with that, I will just say that we really support this bill, and I urge the committee to support it as well.
Great, thank you, Ms. Austin. Are there questions from members of the committee? Seeing no questions, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
We will now switch over to testimony for those in opposition to the bill, starting with Aaron Bolster, followed by Sherry Crockett. Welcome, Mr. Bolster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, members of the Committee on Taxation. My name is Aaron Bolster. I reside in a little town called Norridgewock, and I'm a licensed real estate broker and owner of Allied Realty with offices in the towns of Skowhegan, Wilton, and Rangeley. I've held a Maine real estate license for 21 years. I am honored this year to be the president of the Maine Association of Realtors in 2021. On behalf of the association, Andy Cashman will speak to the language and the substance of LD 418. I will offer a broader context to the real estate transfer tax. Maine real estate sales are essential to our economy. According to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis and economists at the National Association of Realtors, the real estate industry accounted for $12.2 billion, or 18% of Maine's gross state product in 2019. This is the latest data that we have available. While our state and nation grapple with COVID-19 pandemic during 2020 and 2021, Maine's real estate industry has been, as many of you have already said, a very strong economic driver during such unsettled times. Now, during a public health emergency, Maine's overall economy is fragile. This is not the time to disrupt the real estate industry with tax adjustments. I remind you that for Mainers, the real estate transfer tax is catastrophic tax. Property that's being either bought and sold due to a divorce, a death, bankruptcy, and medical emergencies, or business closure and failure. We have seen more and more of this due to COVID-19 in our communities. Although we've heard that the intention behind this bill is to address the affordability housing shortage in our great state, this bill would not do that, because that tax, as already said earlier in the testimony, goes to the home fund, which regularly is being swept into the general fund. Some real estate transfer tax proceeds intended for the home fund have been diverted into that general fund every single year from 2005 through 2019. This is according to the Maine Revenue Service. That number between those years has been calculated at $75.7 million. So clearly you can see there's not a revenue problem. The most effective long-term fix to Maine's current real estate market is to increase the supply of properties in the marketplace. This is an unfair burden for a few, the buyers and sellers of this real estate, to benefit many, the state's general fund, to solve Maine's housing availability and affordability challenges. Real estate sellers and buyers are being penalized to solve a problem that is not of their making. We cannot tax our way to a solution caused by a market of supply and demand.
Mr. Bolster, could you give us a final thought, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'd like to conclude that that we focus on, building communities where local planning and zoning policies allow and encourage the development of affordable housing supply along with commercial development. I ask today that you vote ought not to pass LD 418. Thank you for your consideration of our position at the Maine Association of Realtors on this important subject matter. And thank you for your service to this beautiful state of Maine.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Representative Bickford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I'm glad to see you today. My question is I guess if we're going to have an unfair tax on seasonal properties, real estate, then perhaps, do you agree that with the same train of thought, they should be exempt for paying the school taxes in that community? Since they're only seasonal, they don't take advantage of the school properties. And what's good for one is good for another. Do you agree with that premise?
Not necessarily. This is a very complex subject matter, and transfer tax, the intent, as some have noted, that it was created to help affordable housing in Maine, I think has done some good, but I think the revenues have not been used at its wise, at the wisest point, and therefore creating some of these issues that we've heard all morning here on this testimony.
Additional
Thank
questions, from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Bolster, for your testimony. We'll now hear from Sherry Crockett from Maine Register of Deeds Association. Welcome, Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much. It's almost afternoon. Good afternoon, Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, and members of the Committee on Taxation. My name is Sherry Crockett. I am the Oxford County Register of Deeds, and I do represent the Maine Registers of Deeds Association today. Several of those registers are on the YouTube channel that you so graciously provided for us to be able to view during these unprecedented times. We are taking the position of being opposed to LD 418 as written, but after Representative Williams so graciously met with our group, We are in favor of the amendment she suggested in response to our expressed concerns. We are in favor of one standard tax rate, as we have now, for all transfers, regardless if there is an increase in current tax. Transfer tax is a one-time collected with each deed transferring property. The tax is collected with the document recording fee by the register at the time of recording. 90% of that transfer tax is forwarded to the Maine State Treasurer on a monthly basis. 10% is retained by the county in its general fund. This tax is instrumental in reducing county tax imposed on our municipalities. The original bill put in place is a tiered tax based on many factors. We believe this would place an untenable burden on our consumers due to the confusion it would create. This results in slowing the recording process in our race to record state. We presently collect $2.20 per $500 of consideration. Even with this one rate, we field many calls for assistance in figuring the tax. With the new bill, we would first need to determine whether it was a primary residence or not, then charge $1.50 for the first $150,000, then figure $2.50 per 500 on the consideration in excess of $150,000. It becomes a cumbersome process. Another problem would involve verifying whether it was a primary residence or not. We suspect we would begin to spend more daily hours on the phone figuring tax rather than recording our documents. If the tax is to be changed or increased, it would be much more workable to establish one standard tax rate, as currently exists, on all transactions for ease of calculation. Another problem with the original bill is that rural counties would be penalized because they would be taking in less transfer tax than they presently do. The break-even point with this bill would be on properties that sold for $500,000. Since most of the properties in the more rural counties go for much less than this, they stand to lose money while coastal counties may see an increase. Rural counties are some of the most impoverished in the state and could not stand a further setback.
Ms. Crockett, please give us a final thought.
Yep. If this bill is passed, each county register of deeds would have to see an increase in software prep for it. And the complicated formula is something that we're not looking forward to because we do have attorneys that would have to adjust. We have title companies as well as the individual person coming in to record. Thank you on behalf of the Registers of Deeds Association. I appreciate your time.
Great, thank you. Are there questions from members of the committee? No questions, so thank you for your testimony. We'll now hear from Andrew Cashman, who's representing the Maine Association of Realtors for final testimony today in opposition to the bill. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Senator. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. My name is Andy Cashman. I'm a partner at Freddie Flaherty, and I'm here today on behalf of my client, the Maine Association of Realtors, with over 5,600 members statewide, representing residential and commercial throughout the state. We strongly oppose this bill for a number of the reasons that have already been raised. But you know, the bill's doing two things. It creates two different levels for a tax, and then it's creating two different rates. And I have to only speak to the bill that was proposed. And you know, there are sort of concepts that have been being thrown out there throughout the hearing today, but I'm just going to speak to what was proposed. First of all, the numbers that are here are arbitrary and illogical. 150,000 is well below the average price for first-time home buyers. And if the intention of this bill, as we heard, is to address affordable housing, then why would we be increasing the tax on people that are just purchasing their first home or their starter home and the lower end of the market? And that's universal throughout the state. The second issue is that different rates based on property use, which has not really been focused on very much yet, is a major problem. It's a recipe for disaster. This bill is saying a primary residence would be taxed differently. It's using the homestead definition to do that. And then it's applying the graduated transfer tax, not applying it to properties that are primary residences. So any non-primary residence property would be taxed at the higher rate. And you would, so not only would you be raising the tax on primary residences over 150,000, but also on Mainers that are buying land, second homes, camps, commercial properties, et cetera. The practical application of that is very, very difficult, as you heard a little bit from the Registry of Deeds. Who makes the determination of whether or not something is primary? Who collects that? How do you certify that? Right now, primary residence under the homestead exemption can only be claimed by one person. So is that going to be the buyer or is it going to be the seller? Is that now going to be something that's going to be negotiated at the time of sale? There are so many different questions that are raised by this. You know, as you heard, the REIT is currently paid for by one half the buyer, one half the seller. And you're going to disadvantage somebody. Let's take a normal situation where you have an elderly couple that's downsizing. So presumably they would choose to apply the lower rate on their smaller home before they sell the house that they've been living in for a long time. That house is now going to be taxed at a higher rate, and the buyer is going to be paying a higher rate as well. So there are a lot of problems, but the fundamental problem here is that it doesn't address sweeping. This bill, you heard a lot about building affordable housing, which we are strongly supportive of, but this bill doesn't speak to that at all. Instead, it doesn't address the issue of sweeping the real estate transfer tax, which has been perennially swept. And we're concerned about that. That's taking money away from affordable housing efforts, is shifting the general tax burden. And I really want to point out that 75% of transactions historically, real estate transactions in Maine, are Mainers. So this is not shifting the burden out of state, and it's shifting it not only on, you know, disproportionately all across the board, but you're also not shifting it out of state. As I think, you know, has been discussed a bit. So in closing, we are strong advocates for affordable housing and have been for years. It's in our public policy statement. We testify in support. We have a foundation that's donated millions of dollars over the years for affordable housing that's not currently dealt with. But this bill doesn't deal with that. It doesn't speak towards building affordable housing. We think a more comprehensive approach, the speaker's bill in particular, you know, seems to address trying to tackle this head on. This is not the bill that does that. And there are a lot of questions that have been raised, as you've heard throughout this committee, through this hearing. So again, we're strongly in opposition to this bill because it creates arbitrary distinctions. There creates real problems in the marketplace, and it doesn't address with sweeping the home fund or building more affordable housing. I would like to just point out a couple of things that were mentioned during the course of this testimony. You know, the distinction of comparing us to New Hampshire is just an apples to oranges comparison, because, you know, they don't have sales tax and they don't have property tax. So some tax is going to have to be higher. So it's really an apples to oranges. The other issue that was raised was that this tax hasn't been raised for a long time. Well, there's two reasons for that. The volume of transactions has increased dramatically and the sales price has increased dramatically. So while the tax rate hasn't increased, the revenue from the fund has continually increased. And that's a really important distinction. However, rating the fund has not decreased. So that's the issue that needs to be dealt with, as well as affordable housing. Nobody is arguing that there is a problem with affordable housing, a huge problem that we need to work on together. But this just doesn't do that. I would also note that
Could you give us a final thought, please?
Okay, thank you, Senator. I would just note that my understanding is that, you know, the new federal stimulus bill that's coming out is supposed to be bringing over $1 billion, well over $1 billion to the state. That may be a good source of revenue as well to work from. But I appreciate the committee's time. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have, but we respectfully and very strongly urge you to vote ought not to pass on this bill. It's just not ready.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Cashman. Any questions from members of the committee? Or Senator Pouliot?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Andy, for your testimony. I was wondering, do you have any data? It's my understanding, and I don't know if this could be confirmed for the work session, there's approximately $20 million in the home fund now. And just, you know, I know that there was some written testimony, I think, submitted by Maine Housing, either for nor against the bill. I don't know if they're going to speak next, but I'd just be real interested in like what the oversight of that home fund is like, and also what kind of resources are there that are maybe just not being utilized. That would be great.
Yeah, I may not be the best resource to provide that, but I think Maine State Housing is engaged on this, Senator, but I do appreciate the question.
Additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cashman, for your testimony. We do
Thank you
have
for your
one
time.
more. We have one more person to speak. Didn't mean to overlook him at all. Last but certainly not least, Honorable Jorgensen, Eric Jorgensen from Maine Housing. Is Eric with us?
Yep.
Nope. How you
Thank
doing?
you. Senator Chipman, Representative Terry, distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation. My name is Eric Jorgensen. I know many of you in other contexts, but today I'm testifying as the Director of Government Relations at Maine Housing, and I'm really happy to be here. And I can answer some of these questions that have come up, and I'll try to do that. But just as by way of background, we're speaking neither for nor against this bill. Maine State Housing Authority is the state's housing finance agency. We were created by the legislature in 1969 to address problems of unsafe, unsuitable, overcrowded, and unaffordable housing. And we're structured as an independent agency to utilize effective private methods of finance for public purposes to be independent and responsive. So the Home Fund was created in 1983 to provide a dedicated and flexible source of funding for affordable housing. It's our largest and most mission critical source of state revenue. And I guess I would just say it's one of many tools that we have to provide support for housing in Maine, but it's a very important one. This year, it's going to provide around $19 million in the budget to support a range of critical housing programs. In response to Senator Pouliot's question, I would be very happy to provide a complete breakdown of every penny of how that's been used. We've always got more demand for the Home Fund than we have money in it, and it goes for a lot of important things. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. So the fund was created initially with the support of the realtors, the bankers, and others in the industry who got behind a doubling of the real estate transfer tax to provide that revenue. So 10%, as you've heard, 10% of the transfer tax stays with the county that collects it as an agent fee, and then the balance is split between the general fund and the Home Fund. The Home Fund is used primarily in four main areas. We help Maine people and families buy their first homes. We support urgent home repairs and weatherization. We use it to create affordable apartments, and we use it to support Maine's homeless shelters. And about 1/3 of the fund each year is invested in home ownership programs. So that's the first thing I'll tell you about. It's in a state where single family home ownership is by far the most common form of housing. These programs help first-time lower income home buyers get their foot in the door and help them realize the financial benefits that come from owning instead of renting. And that's something that is getting more and more acute as the market continues to heat up. As you likely know, Maine also has some of the oldest housing stock in the nation. And so in addition to helping people buy houses, the Home Fund also supports critical repairs, accessibility modifications, heating and weatherization improvements, as well as other services that benefit people in this income group. Many of these residents are elderly, and while they may own their own homes, they're on fixed incomes and are no longer able to repair them. So that's where that program comes in. The next third of Home Fund expenditures approximately directly supports the development of affordable multifamily housing. In addition to loans, in addition to the rent a project will generate, there's always a gap that needs to be filled. And that comes from things like the state tax credit, like the one you passed here last year. It can also come from federal tax credits. It can come as zero interest loans from sources like the Home Fund. It can come as grants from the Home Fund. And Maine Housing is well on the way to ramping toward a goal of 1,000 affordable units per year. Resources for this subsidy are more important than ever. So I just say that that's one of the things that, we've been focusing a lot on the low production levels of recent years. And I think we're well beyond that now. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but I think that's really important to think about. Finally, I just say that the rest of the fund that we use each year augments our support for Maine's 36 homeless shelters. And the remainder is also a pot that we have available to respond to emergency short-term housing needs as they arise. In the last couple of years, that's included rent relief. We've deepened wells during a time of drought. We've repaired supportive housing facilities and various other things that emerged during the year that are critical and need to be dealt with. I should also point out that 100% of the money from the Home Fund goes to program, not 1 penny is used for administration or overhead. And I think that's a very important thing. So just in conclusion, we are testifying neither for nor against this bill. We want to be absolutely clear, however, on how critical this funding is to our mission. We're not here to offer an opinion on the policy changes beyond saying that we would really urge you not to pass any legislation that would result in reduced net funding for the Home Fund. I don't think you're not paying us to do tax credit calculations. And I don't know the impact of this, but I just want to make sure that whatever you end up doing does end up being at par value or better for the fund going forward. I just say, I guess I'm just thinking about some of the things that have come up here since I've been listening. But I think it's really important to note a couple of things. One thing is that I really see we're at a high water mark right now in support for housing from the state government. There is definitely need for more of it. The need is urgent. People have made that point again and again, much more eloquently than I will. But I think it's really important to note that this is the first biennial budget proposed ever without a raid in the Home Fund. And the Home Fund is intact right now at about $19 million per year. And as Mr. Bolster said, I think it's really important.
We had another committee member remind me about the 3-minute time limit. Just wondering if you could.
Well, I can answer any questions about this. I mean, I think it's just, I just say that the two other things that I think are important to think about is that we have a signed bond for senior housing. We have the new state LIHTC. So there's some very exciting things happening that are really going to affect supply. And I really appreciate your time.
Excellent. Thank you for being with us. Great to see you again. Questions from members of the committee for Mr. Jorgensen?
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Pouliot.
Yeah, if for the work session, Eric, if you could give us a breakdown of those dollars, where they're going and so forth, that would be great.
Absolutely.
And beyond that, I mean, Maine Housing, I mean, it's probably working with the Maine Affordable Housing Coalition and others to really put a finger on what's going to move the needle to increase inventory. I mean, we've had a lot of discussion on the revenue side of things about, LIHTC and other, avenues to provide resources. But, is there any discussion going on about what Mr. D'Alessandro brought up, which I think is a very valid point about the workforce dilemma and the inability to just even build these, even if we had $100 million drop in our lap tomorrow? I mean, could we even do it,
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the thing I would just say about that is that, the financing issues and stuff are one part of the problem, but you can finance things, but you also need the subsidy. And that's a very important part. And that's where the Home Fund comes in. And then the other part of the equation is cost of construction, which of course is a market-based thing based on the number of people who are able to do that work. And, I think we're subject to the same exact forces as everybody else is in trying to figure out how do you get contractors and how do you get jobs to come in under budget. So yeah, this is an issue we're definitely familiar with. I don't have a specific answer for that, but it's definitely something that plays through in every single housing project we deal with here.
Representative Perry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you, Mr. Jorgensen. So I'm going to ask this question to you, but it's really probably for main revenue for the work session, but you're up now and I have the question on my mind. I remember back around the turn of the century, there was an effort to exempt corporate, if a corporation changed hands and there was real estate involved, to exempt those real estate transfers as not a transfer of real estate, but just a corporate sale. And so my question is, I don't remember what happened with that bill, if that ever passed. So I'd be curious at the work session, are there any exemptions to the real estate?
I can look into that. At the turn of the
transfer
century, I was
tax
much
and
younger.
any real estate being transferred in ways.
Yeah, I'm happy to look.
Yes, I now that we're, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. We're getting some back and forth with the technology here. I'd be very happy to look into that. I don't know the answer, but I can get that for you for the work session.
Thank you.
Additional questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Jorgensen, for being with us today and for your testimony. We don't have anybody else signed up to speak on this bill, so we'll now conclude the public hearing on LD 418. That concludes all of our bills for today. I don't have any announcements. I don't know if you have anything, Representative Terry, or if Julie has anything for us before we wrap up.
I do. I just have one little, just a little again, a reminder of housekeeping for our names on our Zoom tiles. If we can please make sure that it identifies what position we have and our committee name. I know it's kind of a pain to do it every single time sometimes, but I would appreciate it if we could give that our best effort. And just a quick, it looks like I missed Representative Jorgensen, or the Honorable Mr. Jorgensen to say hello again. So that was it. Thank you. Julie?
Yeah, Julie, you have
Yes, I just wanted to mention that the work session on these bills was originally scheduled to be next Thursday. That's had to be postponed. So it's been changed until Tuesday, the 16th, 2 weeks from today. So that's when the work session for these bills is scheduled. Just wanted to mention that.
right. That's because we're scheduled to be at the session at the Civic Center on that day. So we had to change that. Representative Sachs, do you have something?
Yes, sir. So does that give especially for the bill we just heard, 418, does that give enough time to sort of get the information that we're going to need to work through some of these issues? I understand there's some significant data that needs at least to be attempted to be collected.
So we schedule kind of automatically our work sessions after the bills are scheduled. I know that the sponsor of this actually asked for some more time, so we'll probably give her the time that she needs. That being said, what the other ones that are scheduled for next Thursday will now go to the following Tuesday.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
We can, even though bills are scheduled for work session, even the day of, if we get a request for more time, we can just not take them up, or we can take them up and vote to table them. So we have a few options there. So I guess that's everything. Did you have anything else for us, Julie, or are we all set?
Nothing
You're
else.
muted, but nothing else.
Nothing
Okay,
else.
great. Well, I guess we're all set for today. So we'll adjourn the meeting of the Committee on Taxation. We'll see everybody Thursday morning at 9:30.
Thank you all.